So our objective today is going to be to make some jam, or in fact jelly, because we're going to strain out all the seeds and make something that's just delicious and smooth and fruity. We are of course going to use wild fruits for this, and what I'm going to do is actually use all of the wild fruits that I can find within walking distance of my house. So I went out for several walks along hedgerows and into different bits of woodland and so on, and here's what I managed to find. So we found some lovely blackberries. Blackberries were really early in the south of England, but we found some nice blackberries. We found crab apples in the woods. It's not a ball. No, it's not for you. We found feral apples in a hedgerow. Now, feral apples and crab apples, not quite the same thing. Crab apples are wild apples. Feral apples are apples that have grown from an apple core or seed that somebody has discarded. I also found these interesting little things, which initially I thought were crab apples, but actually I think are probably an ornamental pear species. So we picked some of those. And along the hedgerows in the fields where we normally walk either, we found lots and lots of sloes. Sloes are like a tiny bitter plum. We also found bullaces, which is a slightly larger version of the same thing. And some damsons, which again, kind of next size up. We found some Myrobalan plums, which are like a cherry plum. Different species of plum, but like a small, quite sour plum. Hawthorn. Now, a lot of people call these hawthorn berries, but they are in fact a pome fruit. They're like a small apple. So we picked some hawthorn. Hawthorn is actually quite edible. It's quite bitter though, so we won't use a lot. We'll just put a little bit in there just for completeness and flavour. Rosehips, of course, the fruit of wild roses. We've got two different kinds of rosehips in here. We've got the red ones from wild roses, and we've got purple ones from a different species of rose. And elderberries. So in total, 12 different varieties of fruit going into this jam. So all of the stone fruits, that's the sloes, plums, damsons, bullaces, stone fruits, all kind of varieties of plum. In fact, sloes are like a tiny, tiny, very bitter plum. All of those, plus the blackberries, are going to go in the freezer. Everything else I think will stand until the morning. Okay, so today is the day we're going to make our hedgerow jelly. So I've got all my plums and sloes in there. Blackberries, these are both frozen. Elderberries, we went out and picked some lovely elderberries. I've got apples of various varieties, feral and crab apples. I've got these little ornamental crab apples or pears. And hips and haws. So our method today is basically stew these fruits down until they're fully cooked, force them through a sieve, and we will thicken and set the resulting juice with sugar. So, big pan, and we'll just get a few things cooking first. And I think we'll just stew these plums first. We're going to do this in batches anyway. They're like snooker balls. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water to stop those burning on the bottom, but they don't really need much. We're not adding water to this at all. It's all going to be fruit pulp and juice. So really just the tiniest little splash of water in there. And then we're going to put that over a low heat. Just to melt, firstly thaw out those plums and then just stew them. So, lid on, we'll give that about 10 minutes. Meanwhile over here we'll do some preparation. So I'm just going to quickly rinse these elderberries and the apples. Most of the other fruit has either been washed or doesn't require washing. Okay, and the best way to get elderberries off their little twigs is just to comb them off gently with a fork, like this. Take your time doing this or else you end up with bits of twig in there. So just a few at a time. Just comb them gently away from their stalks. Elderberries are a bit of a strange fruit really. They are not related to any of the other fruits that we've got in this mix, and on their own they can be a bit almost savoury, but in a mix like this they'll be just fine. They make very good chutneys. So I'm not worrying about all the other stalks that are still in there at the moment. We're just going to actually comb off these berries like this. Now a lot of people will tell you that uncooked elderberries contain arsenic, and what they actually mean to say is cyanide. I think there is something about elderberries that means you should really cook them and not eat them raw. I think it is that they can contain chemicals that are the precursor to cyanide if they're introduced to your digestive juices. So they're just not really a nice enough fruit to eat raw anyway, really. They are a bit of a filler as far as I'm concerned. They've got wonderful colour and juiciness, but actually in terms of flavour, they're not up there with blackberries. Okay, so there we go. We've got about, I don't know, a couple of cups full of elderberries. They don't smell sweet at all. They're not like blackberries in that regard. So we're going to cook them together with the blackberries because they've got similar sort of pip sizes, and because we're straining things, we need to think about that, about what's going to actually combine well together for cooking. So next, I'm just going to pick over these little crab apples, or crab pears, whatever they are, and I'm just taking them off getting rid of the leafy bits. They don't come off of their stalks very well, and I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, let's check up on these plums. Yep, they're pretty much cooked, I would say now. We just need to make sure that when they're squished against the pan, they are completely soft. Indeed they are. That's good. Just going to carefully tip that into the strainer. There's no point washing the pan because next up, blackberries and elderberries are going to go in there. Blackberries again, we're cooking from frozen. Tiny little splash of water just to stop them burning on the bottom, and over a medium heat with the lid on. And then back over here, well, gravity's already done some of our job for us, but I just need to do that for a little while to get the fruit pulp and juice to go through the strainer. All of the bits that I don't use will go on the compost. Of course, these seeds won't grow now because they've been cooked, but they will rot down and can be used as compost in the garden. So just for fun, let's have a little taste of this. I know what this is going to be like. It's going to be incredibly sour because it's got sloes in it. Oh wow, really sour. But don't forget, we're adding sugar in a minute. And also there's lots of other fruits going in here. So this is going to be a really good acidity base for some of the sweeter fruits like blackberries that are going in there. Okay, and all we do here is kind of stir with the back of the spoon in such a way as to try to force the pulp through the sieve. We will get to a point in a minute where it's kind of diminishing returns, and eventually we have to kind of decide to stop. A good way to gauge that is make sure the spoon is completely free of stones. Scrape the bottom of the sieve off and then have another go. And that way we will see how much we're getting through, which is actually minimal now. So one more little go and I'm going to stop. Yeah, so it might seem like there's a lot of pulp wasted in the sieve there, but really I can't get any more through. Part of that is the mechanical presence of the stones is preventing me from crushing it against the sieve, but it's not to worry. Most of that is stones now. So that goes in the compost, and then we just leave that ready for the next batch. So blackberries. I wish you could smell this aroma that's coming off of here. And look at all that juice that's come out, because we did only put a tiny bit of water in there. So most of that is blackberry juice, well, and elderberry. Now apples are one area where I've been super diligent about washing, because some of these have been on the deck, and so yeah, they could have acquired all kinds of dirt and nasties, so I've given them a really good scrub. I'm only going to actually cut out anything that looks bad here, but rest of it, because it all contains pectin, it's all going to go in there, pips, peel, the whole lot. Okay, apples and hawthorn and those little crab pears. Again, a little splash of water, not much. And over the heat to get them stewing. Blackberries and elderberries, mostly they've drained on their own, but again we will force them through. The seeds won't come through, but some of the fruit pulp will, and we might as well have that because it's got some flavour and goodness in it. We're not aiming for a clear jelly here, so this is not show quality. This is going to be hedgerow jelly. It's pretty much a seedless jam more than a jelly, really. So rosehips we treat just a little bit differently. I've put them in a small pan, taken the little fibrous calyces off, and just enough water to cover them. Perhaps a bit more than that. Because they're full of fibrous little seeds, and we don't really want those seeds. We just want the kind of juice and flavour out of these. So I'm going to just simmer those until they burst. All the juice comes out into the water, and then we just strain them. We don't sieve them. Okay, apples and mini pears now strained into there. So that's our mixture of juice and pulp so far. Last thing is just the rose hips, but there isn't enough room in the top of this jug now for the strainer. So we are going to have to decant some of this off into another container. Okay, now the rose hips are soft and they've all burst, but we're going to do this slightly differently to the other fruits. So we're just going to tip that through the sieve, and I'm not going to rub it round because rose hips contain little fibres in with the seeds. I think I've already mentioned already. So all we're going to do is just give that a little press to get the juice through. Ideally we would have strained that through muslin or something like that, or cheesecloth, but I don't have any, so just going to press that. Just express the juice from the fruits, and that's it. Okay, I just tipped that all back into the jug just to recheck my measurements, and actually I'm glad I did. It's at 1250 ml, so we need 1.25 kilograms of sugar. Okie dokie, right, we've got 1.25 litres of juice and pulp here. We're going to put 1.25 kilos of sugar in there. So I've got a kilo bag of sugar here. I bought jam sugar, which has got added pectin. Really, probably not necessary here because there's bound to be a fair old bit of pectin in all of those hedgerow fruits. So that's a kilo, and that's 250 grams of regular sugar. That's a lot of sugar. But that's how jam works. So we just got to stir that now to dissolve the sugar, and we're going to heat it gently, bring that to the boil, and then we can look at temperatures. So, got an assortment of jam jars here. Just going to take the lids off. The lids I will sterilise in boiling water, and the jars I will sterilise in the oven. Can't do the lids in the oven because they've got a rubber seal inside them. So always try to have more jars than I think I will strictly need for the jam, because it's better to sterilise more jars than you need than it is to have to rush around at the end. And scrabble around and find more. So I think that's enough jars. Okay, so we've got this on the boil now, and we just need to monitor the temperature. Instant read would be better, and we've got to boil this until the temperature comes up to 105 degrees centigrade, and that is the set point. I don't think we're actually very far off, to be honest. 101, 102. So we've only got a little bit of boiling to do. And what we're doing when we boil it here is just driving off moisture, really. So we're reducing it down, increasing the sugar concentration to the point where it will set in conjunction with pectin. So just got to keep boiling that until that comes up to 105. And the other way we can test this is just by putting a spoon in there, and then we'll let that spoon cool on the side, and we'll just see if what we've got is a kind of jelly-like texture. But I can tell just by looking at it, just the way it's boiling there is very indicative of it being close to its set point. And we've got a pan of boiling water here that we're going to use for the lids. Now, if you're wanting to preserve jam for a long period, it's best to actually can it. So actually to put it into the jars and then stand the jars back in boiling water with the lids loosely sealed and bring them to the boil so that the contents are boiling when you seal them. That's not strictly necessary for shorter term storage. So I'm going to put this into sterilized jars. The acidity and the sugar content will be enough to preserve it for several months, which is as long as it's going to last. Meanwhile, just going to skim this froth off the top of the jelly. There's nothing wrong with this. A lot of people continually skim throughout the boiling and waste a lot of the jelly. Actually, I always leave it right till the end. There's nothing wrong with this froth, and it will set, and in fact it tastes just fine. It's just aesthetically not quite as pleasing to look at as the dark jelly. So I'm going to skim it off. I'm going to put it in a little dish and set that in the fridge, and that's chef's privilege. We can have that as soon as it's set. Okay, jars are, I think, cool enough now, so we can fill them up with the jelly. Yeah, that's good. You know if you got this wrong because you hear it boiling inside the jar. And we fill them up to close to the top. Right, camera off for a minute. We'll come back in a minute when these are all full up. Okay, not bad. So now we just got to match up all the jars to the lids. Like so. And then we'll tighten them up before they cool down. Okay, so the morning after, there it is. We've got 6 jars plus 1 jar with all that weird foamy stuff that we skimmed off, which will taste just as good, but just doesn't look quite as nice. So, I think we're going to open one of these jars and give it a little taste. Okay, time to give this jelly a try. And for this purpose, I've got 2 nice crisp slices of thick, fluffy toast. So, well, the first question is, has it set? And the answer appears to be yes. We've got I would say almost a perfect jelly texture there. Look at that. Perfect. Spreads very nicely and smoothly. I don't know if you can hear my stomach rumbling. Now I've spread that possibly a little bit generously on there, but I do want to taste it properly. So here goes. Oh, that's really, really good. That's really tasty. It's got just enough sharpness and acidity and bitterness from the damsons and sloes, but some really interesting aromas and sweetness from the blackberries, elderberries, rosehips. The interesting thing is here, if I was given this blind, I don't think I would be able to identify what fruits are in there. That is really superb. It's got such a depth of fruity flavour. That is just beyond superb. Really, really pleased with that result. Now, it might appear that I used quite a lot of sugar when I was making this. I put in 1 kilo of sugar for every 1,000 ml of liquid. But putting in the sugar 50-50 like that, or 50-50 by weight essentially, enables you to get a really quick set, which means that you don't have to boil the jam for a very long time, which means you don't drive off all the aromas from the fruit. So we have a thing in this house called the toast tax, and everyone who eats toast in this house must pay it. So there we go, that was Hedgerow jelly, and I think that was a huge success. Quite hard work to make, and quite hard work for collecting all those different fruits, but that was just exercise, I guess. So, looking forward to giving a jar or two of this away to various friends and family, but obviously we'll save a few for ourselves as well. So I hope that was interesting, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.